Good day, student. My name is Victoria Shilongo, and I am your tutor for biology in this program. Well, let's begin. Before I begin, let's look at my contact details. That is the email address there you can see on your screen, as well as the telephone number, the contact time from 18-hour to 20-hour. So please make use of that. Now, in this presentation, we are going to provide you with information that will help you to prepare for your examination in biology. First of all, let's start with what is biology. Biology is one of those interesting subjects because it's about living things. In short, biology is a study of life. Things that are regarded as living things. Those are the things that we are going to study in biology. Now, for an object or a substances to be considered as a living things or to be alive, that substances must carry out 7 characteristics. Now let's start with those 7 characteristics of living organisms. The first one is movement. When we are looking, first, movement. Now let's define the word movement. Movement is an action by an organism or a part of an organism so that it can change its position or place. So a living organisms or substances that is considered to be alive, it must be able to move on its own. It must be able to change position or places, or a part of it should be able to change position or a place. Another characteristic that a living organisms must be able to do is that living organisms must respire, or we say respiration. What is respiration? It is the releasing of energy from food substances in all living cells. So that living organisms must be able, on its own, must be able to release energy from substances that organisms take inside its cells. The third characteristic that organisms must be able to do, nutrition. What is nutrition? Is the taking in of organic and inorganic nutrients. When we are talking about nutrients, we are referring to food from their surrounding. Why do they need these nutrients? For health, for energy, to grow and to repair worn out cells. Let's look at other characteristics, because these characteristics are 7. The next characteristic is called irritability or sensitivity. What is irritability or sensitivity? Remember, we are still talking about the characteristic of living organisms. Is the ability to detect stimuli. When we are talking about stimuli, we are referring to changes, any changes in environment, and to respond to it. For example, a changes can be a loud noise. It can be something that you smell in an environment, and how you respond to it. That characteristic is called irritability. And only living organisms are able to show that characteristic. Let's look at the next characteristic, growth. Is the permanent increase in the size and the number of cells and dry mass of an organism. For living organisms, they grow. They increase in size. What increase in size? Their cells, as well as the number of cells increase in size. Let's look at another characteristic, excretion. Living organisms must excrete. Excretion is the removal from the body of waste product of metabolism. Now, when we are talking about metabolism, are waste product by the body cells, meaning waste product that are produced inside our cells. Now, and the removal of toxic product which are in excess in the body. Please take note. Excretion, we say, is a removal of waste product of metabolism. What do we mean? Waste product that are produced inside our cell. Please, student, do not confuse excretion with ingestion. What is ingestion? It is the removal of undigested food such as feces. We don't excrete feces, we ingest feces. What do we excrete? We excrete waste product that are produced inside our cells. Such as what? Such as urine, such as carbon dioxide, as well as such as sweat. Carbon dioxide is produced inside our cells as the end product of respiration. Urine is produced in our kidney and it contains metabolic waste product such as urea, which is produced in our liver cells, as well as excess water. Let's move on to the next characteristic, reproduction. Reproduction is very, very common word. So that means reproduction is also one of those characteristics that are carried out by living organisms. What is reproduction? It's the ability to reproduce offspring of the same species. It's an ability to give, to produce one of their kind. Now, take note, these are 7 characteristics. An easy way to remember it, I have an acronym here called Mr. Nigger. Mr. Nigger represents the 7 characteristics. M for movement, R for respiration, N for nutrition, I for irritability, G for growth, E for excretion, R for reproduction. Please do not forget, for a living organism to be considered as a living thing, it must carry out all these 7 characteristics under normal circumstances. So that means for an object to be considered as a living, it must carry out the 7 characteristics. Good. Let's move on to the next topic. Viruses. We talk about the 7 characteristics. We just mentioned them. Now, are viruses living organisms? Now, their argument that scientists put forward that state that this argument, some are supporting the classification of viruses as living organisms. Other arguments are against the classification of virus as living organisms. So let's start first to understand whether viruses are living organisms. Do not forget, for an object to be a living thing, it must carry out all 7 characteristics on its own. Now, let's look at what are the arguments that qualify a virus to be a living organism. Now, viruses are capable of reproduction within another cells. So this means virus, they can reproduce, but they can only do so inside a living cells. Because they do reproduce, it is considered, because of that argument. Which argument? The reproduction. They are able to reproduce inside the living cells. So because of that, they are considered as living. Now let's look at another argument which classify viruses as living organisms. Viruses, they do have the genetic materials. They do have the genetic materials such as the DNA or RNA. So they can evolve, they can change over a period of time. And only living organisms have genetic materials. Because of these two features, the genetic materials, the ability to reproduce, viruses are considered by some scientists as living organisms. Okay, so what you need to take note of the argument that are supporting virus as living organisms. Let's look at other arguments that are supporting virus as a non-living organisms. Now, viruses are considered as non-living organisms because they don't have all structures and activity that all live organisms have. And living organisms carry out all 7 characteristics. Those are some of the activity. But virus only carry out 1. So you cannot be able to be a living organism if you only carry out 1 characteristic. And because of that, viruses are not considered as living organisms. Now, viruses, they don't have cell structures. They don't have structure that a common cell has. Like, they don't have a cytoplasm, or they don't have structures inside the cells. Like, they don't have mitochondria, they don't have a cell membrane, they don't have a nucleus. They only have the genetic materials. Because they don't have a cell structures, cytoplasm or any other organelles, viruses are not living organisms. Now, they also, as I said earlier, they do not carry out all 7 characteristics. Moreover, viruses, they are non-cellular. So that means they are not made up of cells. When you look at your diagram in your book there, you can clearly see that the virus are only made up of protein coat, and they are also just have in the middle, they have a strand of genetic material, which is either DNA or RNA. So that means they don't share. Beside the DNA, they don't have any cytoplasm, no cell wall, no mitochondria, which a normal cell has. So please, student, take note of the argument that are supporting virus as a living things, and also that are supporting virus as a non-living things. Now, what are these? Are virus living or non-living? Now, viruses, scientists state that they are at the border. They are at the border of living and non-living things. They are not really fully living organisms, neither they are not fully non-living organisms. They are at the border. That's why they do possess some characteristic of living things, and they also possess some characteristic of non-living things. What you need to take note of is the argument that are supporting viruses as a non-living organism, an argument that are also supporting virus as a living organisms. Good. We mentioned the characteristic of living organisms. We also look at the virus. Now, we have a terminology in biology called classification. It's not only in biology, even in our daily life, we classify objects. Now, in biology, when we are talking about classification, what do we mean? Classification, it means, the definition basically means the grouping, we are grouping organisms into taxa. When we are talking about taxa in biology, we are referring to groups. We are grouping living organisms into group by looking at what? Based on similar features and characteristics. So that means we group living organisms into different groups based on the features they have that looks the same. So that means, for example, we can group all the birds in one group because we might use the wings. We also look at, for example, the fish in one group because their body are covered with scales. So we look at the features that these specific organisms have and we group it. We group all those organisms into one group based on that similar features. Please, student, classification, a grouping of organisms into taxa based on similar features and characteristics. Just like we group our students into different classes based on the similar subject they are taking. Now let's look at some of the examples that we use to classify. In biology, we have what we call kingdom. Kingdom are broadest group. Broadest group because we have many living organisms there in kingdom. Now, the kingdom, we have 5 kingdoms. Living, so that means all living organisms, all million of living organisms that we have on Earth that are identified, we group them into 6 kingdoms. What are those kingdoms? Kingdom Monera, this is where we group all the bacteria. Kingdom Protoctista, these are the group where we group organisms where these organisms that looks like animal, but they are not animal, and they look like plant and they are not animal. But if you have to look at them, they look more like animal, but they are not animal. Excuse me, they look more like plants, but they are not plants. Kingdom Fungi. We also have animal mushroom. It's one of these examples of organisms that we group it in kingdom fungi. Kingdom plants, all the plants that we see, all plants that we see, we group them in this because we look at that they all have roots, they all have stem, they all have leaves, they all have branches, they all have, some have flowers, some have seeds and fruits, but all plants, we group them into one group. Why we group them into one group? Because we use those features, the stem, they all have stem, the roots, they all have roots. So we also have another group which we call kingdom animal. So that means all the animal, any living organisms which is considered as animal, human beings, cockroach, snake, they are all in this kingdom. So what are we saying? We are talking about classification. Let's move on. Now, there are different types of classification in biology. We have what we call hierarchical classification, a hierarchy. Now, in any organization, there is always a hierarchy. A hierarchy means different levels. At a school level, we have different level of people. In terms of, we have the management, we have the teacher, we have the student, and we have the institutional worker. So when we are talking about hierarchical classification, it's what is it? Let's define it. It's a grouping of organisms into different levels. Different level, as I said, you have the upper level, the middle level, and the lower level. In biology, we classify organisms into different from a broader group which we call a kingdom, to a more specific group which we call a species. Good. So look at hierarchical classification. It's a grouping of organisms into different levels from a broader group, kingdom, to a more specific group called species. Now, what are these levels that we classify living organisms into using a hierarchical classification? These levels are called levels of organization. Let's try to know them. The first one, as I said, the broader one, the biggest one. We have the kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, the family, the genus, and the species. The kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, the family, the genus, and the species. So these are the different groups that we classify living organisms. From the broader group, which is a kingdom, to the lowest or more specific group called the species. Now, for you to remember this level well, we came up with a sentence that say, king, it helps you to remember. You just look at the first letter. King, then you know that that is about kingdom. PHILLIP, P, which is for phylum, come, representing a class, over, order, for, family, GEINGER, representing a genus, species, snakes. What am I saying? I am saying we came up with a sentence called King PHILLIP come over for GEINGER snakes to help you remember the 7 level of organization. As I said, I'm going to say it again. King, it helps you to remember the word kingdom. PHILLIP, it helps you to remember the level of organization called phylum. Come, it helps you to remember the word class. Over, it will help you to remember the word order. Family, for, it will help you to remember the word family. Genus, it will help you, GEINGER, it will help you to remember the word genus. Snakes, it will help you to remember the word species. So that is a hierarchical classification. Let's move on. Classifying organisms based on homologous and analogous structure. Now here we are talking about for us to classify living organisms, we look at certain features. Now those features or structures we have 2 types, homologous or analogous. Homologous, look here, homo means the same. Now what are these homologous structures? Now homologous structure are structures that have similar fundamental structure. This structure at the foundation, going back to the zygote, when the zygote was formed from the sperm cell and the egg cell, and these zygotes start to divide into a ball of cell called blastula. Now those cells, so that means this structure that we are called homologous structure, they have similar fundamental structure. They came from either the same number or the similar cell or similar tissue. Okay, take note, homologous structure are structures that have similar fundamental structure. At the foundation, this structure came from similar tissue. Now, they have similar in position and development. Where these structures are located on the body of an organism, they are located at the similar position, as well as they have developed at the similar position. Let's move on again. Because they have similar fundamental structure, they have similar in position and development, they share a common ancestor. This similarity in fundamental structure, similarity in position and development, only is so because they share a common ancestor. They share some similarity. They have an ancestor which all came from. Then we move on and say, again, homologous structures. This structure, they don't perform the same function. This structure, when you look at them, when you observe them, they do not have the same function. They have totally different function, and this structure also look very different from each other. So this homologous structure, what are they? Let's look at their example. A front leg of a frog. If you look at the frog and you look at the front leg, as well as the horse front leg, a lion front leg, a human being front leg. For example, very good, we are human beings. If we look at our human front arm, it's not leg, but we have arm. Our arm and the lion front leg, they look different from each other. But they have similar fundamental structure. And when you look at them, the position where they are located at the same position. Another example is the wings of a bat and also the wing of a bird. Now, the wing of a bat and wing of bird, they are also homologous. So that means they have similar fundamental structures, similar in position and development, and they share a common ancestor. The wing of a bat and a leg of a frog or a human being arm, they do not perform the same function. Also, the human being arm and the wing of a bird look very different from each other. So take note, when we are talking about homologous structure, we are looking in terms of the foundation where this structure all came from, and also in terms of position where they are located, and also in terms of development. And because of this similarity, that they came to a conclusion that they share a common ancestor. Now, we are moving on to another structure that we use to classify living organisms. These are called analogous structure. Analogous structure, these are structure found on an organisms that look the same. This structure looks the same. For example, the wings of a dove and a wing of a bat. They all are winged. They look the same, and they are used for the same purposes. They perform similar function, but they have different structure. So that means analogous structure, we group organisms into group based on what? Based on the features that they look the same, they perform the same function, but fundamentally they have different structures. Good. Let's move on. Reason why we classify living organisms. Why do we put these organisms into group? Imagine when you go outside, there are many different living organisms there. Imagine how difficult it is for you to learn them. Or, let's look at another example. Imagine when you go to the library, all the books are just scattered around. None of the books are arranged into order of subject. Will it be easy for you to study them? Of course not. So that can help you to get an idea of the reason why we classify living organisms, to help when trying to identify unknown organisms. The group that is already existing, we say we have kingdom Monera, kingdom Protoctista, kingdom Fungi, kingdom plants, kingdom animal. Now, if you identify a new organisms, you only observe its features, then you group it into ready available group. Let's say that animal have stem, have root, then you know already that it will be It will fit in kingdom planes. So it helps when trying to identify unknown organisms. Another reason why we classify living organisms, to make it easier to study organisms. It makes it easier. Let's say you want to study a certain snake. Then you just go straight to the reptiles. You just need to go to the book and you look at the index and you look at the heading reptiles. That will help you. It makes it easier for you to study. And also to keep track of all organisms. Keep track means you will just be able to keep track of those organisms. And also to arrange organisms in order. Moreover, to communicate globally or internationally about organisms. Because the reptiles in biology in Namibia, it's the same reptiles in South Africa. So you'll be able to communicate because it's about one thing. Now, let's look at the vertebrate or chordata. Vertebrate or chordata. Now, vertebrates or chordata, it's a group of animals. So we are going to look at the classes. Remember, we said when it comes to hierarchical classification, we said we're grouping organisms into kingdom, into phylum, into class. Now, these are the classes now that we are looking at. Now, we said kingdom, they are animal kingdom. What are the phylum? There are two phyla. If there are two phyla, we call them phyla. What are they? Vertebrates or invertebrates or chordata. Here we have an A here, chordata. Now, what are they? They are actually 5. The first one, bony fish. Now let's look at the main external diagnostic features. In your book, you will see pictures there of a different type of fish. Now this bony fish with a bony rays. Now take note, not all fish have a bony ray. Those that have a bony ray are the only ones that are considered as vertebrates. Now, another main diagnostic features means the features that you can able to tell, the features that you can able to see. Now, gills covered by operculum. So when we look at the fish, we have a part that covers the gills. The part that covers the gill, meaning that from the outside, when you have a fish, you look at the head, the part that covers the gill, protecting it from the outside, that is called operculum. Now let's talk about the amphibian. This is where you find your frogs. And let's look at the main external diagnostic features. They have a smooth, moist skin. Most of them also have 4 limbs. 4 limbs or 4 legs. Let's talk about the chordata or vertebrates features. Continue. The class of aves or birds. Let's look at the main external diagnostic features. The body is covered by feathers. So that means the ave, that class of bird, we also call it aves. The main diagnostic features, we say the body, when you look at the birds are covered by feather. And they have a beak to search for food or to pick food. We also have a class of reptiles. The reptiles, these are your snake, these are your crocodile. And the main external diagnostic features is that their body are covered by a dry, tough, scaly skin. Their body are covered by scales, but dry and tough, especially for the crocodiles. Let's move on. The mammalia. The mammalia, this is where you find animals such as human beings, chimpanzee. This is also where you find the goats. This is where you find a lot of the dogs. This is where you find quite a large number of animals as mammalian. Now, their external diagnostic features, their body are covered with hair or fur. Now, they have mammary gland that help them to feed their younger one. They have an external ear flap, which we call pillae. They have an external ear flap, which we call pillae. Now, let's talk about when you look at living organisms. All living organisms, their population have decreased. Nowadays, the living organisms population decreases due to what? Habitat loss. Habitat loss, meaning that the area where these organisms live are no more there. They are destroyed by human beings, and these have caused also what we call deforestation. People are cutting down trees, human population is increasing, making people to cut down trees to build houses or to have field for cultivating to feed human beings. Competition from human. There is also another competition from human, meaning that they want to run away so that they do not get harm from human beings. Hunting. Human beings are hunting. Some of them are hunting just for trophy hunting, but these also have, so if you hunt, meaning that you are shooting a certain animal, and when you shoot a certain animal, that animal will die. So it will not live. What will happen to its population? It will decrease. So those are some of the things that decreases the living organism population of any species. Habitat loss, competition from human, and hunting. But, however, we have what we call captive breeding program for animal. We do have some animals that are kept, and they are kept in camp where they are, so that we can allow these organisms to survive. And these have helped to increase the number of those species. And also, it also have allowed these organisms to have a good place for them to breed, and also more offspring will, of course, when they are kept there, kept away from human beings, that will happen, that they are kept and they are fed. What will happen is that these organisms, they will grow, they will reproduce, and more offspring, so the population will increase, less infant mortality, less animal will die, and for later, they will be reintroduced to the wild, meaning that later they will be brought back, they will go back to their natural environment to enable them to continue surviving there. Now, the type of cells. Living organisms are made up of cells. Now, in your book, you do have a prokaryotic cells as well as eukaryotic cells. Now, let's quickly look at, so that means living organisms are made up of, we classify them based on what type of cell they are made up of. They are made up of prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic. I want you to look at the word pro and chaotic. The word chaotic means nucleus, pro means before nucleus. Now, these are cells that don't have a nucleus, and eukaryotic cells are cells that have a nucleus. Now, let's look at their features. The features of prokaryotic cells are extremely small, they have no nucleus, and they are found in unicellular organisms. Uni means one cell only. Now let's talk about eukaryotic cells. They have large cells, they have a true nucleus, and they are found in multicellular organisms. Please check in your book the prokaryotic cells there and eukaryotic cells. And check in terms of the eukaryotic cells, they do have a nucleus. And when you're talking about eukaryotic cell, example are plant cells, animal cells, fungi cells, as well as some Protoctista. The fungi cell only yeast, which is a prokaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cell, this is where we have the bacteria. All bacteria are prokaryotic cells. They don't have a nucleus. Now, then we move on to the structure of a cell. Now, a structure of a cell, we have cell membrane. When you look at your cells there in your book, you have a cell membrane. For example, when we start with an animal cell, we have a cell membrane. That is a first layer. When you draw the first line, that is a cell surface membrane. And you also have you have a cytoplasma where you have structures such as the mitochondria, where you have structures such as the ribosomes and the lysosome. This is also where you have structures such as the nucleus, and inside the nucleus you have structures such as the nucleolus. Now when you look at the plant cells, a plant cell, you have the cell wall, and also you have the cell membrane. Also you have the cytoplasma, where you have organelles such as mitochondrion, where you have structures such as the chloroplasta, the nucleus, as well as the nucleolus there, and you have a large vacuole. Now, let's look at the cell surface membrane. Now, the cell surface membrane is described as having a fluid mosaic. When you look at the structure of the cell surface membrane, it's made up of two layers. The head, which is attached to, you have a head on the surface. In the middle, you have a structure that looks like a tail. The head, which we call it hydrophilic, and the tail, we call it hydrophobic. Now, the two layers, they are made up, the upper, the head, is made up of it's made up of phosphate. And the middle layer, it's made up of lipid. That's why the two layers are called phospholipid. Now, this phospholipid, the phosphate allows water to pass through there. And also the lipid maintain this movement of water. Now, in the cell membrane, we have different type of protein there. We have channel protein, we have carrier protein, and they are floating in the liquid. Now, the protein that are in the cell membrane form a certain pattern, and that same certain pattern look like a mosaic pattern. A mosaic pattern, that's why we say now the cell membrane is a fluid mosaic. Fluid mosaic means you have fluid there in the cell membrane, liquid that are capable of movement, and you have also protein that are arranged in a certain pattern. Good, let's move on. The cell structure and the function, our cell membrane. The cell surface membrane, we say it controls the movement of substances in and out of the cells. Then mitochondrion. Mitochondrion, it releases energy during cell respiration. Remember, we spoke about a characteristic of living organisms called respiration. Now, where does respiration take place? It takes place in the mitochondrion. Now, this is one. If you have two, we call it mitochondria. We only remove this O and A, O and N, then we have A there. Now, so that means this mitochondria, it's part of the cytoplasma. It's found inside the cells. That's why we say respiration takes place inside the cells. It's a releasing of energy during cell respiration, which take place inside the cell. Now then we have a cell wall. The cell wall, which is only found in plant cells. What does it do? It prevents the bursting of plant cells. It prevents the plant cell from bursting. Bursting in case when more water move into the cells by osmosis. Now, let's talk about chloroplasta. Chloroplasta is also one of those structures which is only found in plant cells. Now, why in plant cells? Because this is the structure where photosynthesis takes place. Now, photosynthesis only takes place in plant cell. Why? Because it has chloroplasta. Animals do not have chloroplasta. Let's talk about the nucleus. It carries genetic information. So the function of the nucleus, or the role of nucleus in the cells, it carries genetic information. It controls cell activity and functions. So nucleus performs two functions there. It carries the genetic information. It carries the genetic information of the cells that need to be passed on to the other cells, or that need to be passed on to the other cell. For example, during meiosis, when a cell divides, we have two types of cell division, meiosis and mitosis. Meiosis is a type of cell division whereby when the cell divides, the new cell will have a reduction in the number of chromosomes. So that means the nucleus still carry the genetic information. Now, when it comes to mitosis, the cell retain the same number of chromosomes. If the cell had 46 chromosomes, for example, in human beings, the new cell that will be formed will also have 46 chromosomes. Now, another function of the nucleus, it controls cell activity and functions. Now, vacuole. The vacuole is a space that is a structure or a space in the middle of the cell. And it's found in plant cells. In animal cells are there, but they are very few. And sometimes, they are very small. What is the function of a vacuole in a cell? It keeps the cell firm or turgid. Let's talk about tonoplasta. Tonoplasta is it's a large vacuole membrane. When you draw a vacuole, it has that line, that first line, that is a tonoplasta. What does it do? It controls the entry into and out of the vacuole, meaning that it controls the movement of substances in and out of the vacuole. We also have what we call lysosome. Lysosome is a structure which is found in the cytoplasm of both plant cell and animal cell. What does it do? It destroys bacteria that enter the cells, and it also destroys unwanted organelles. If we have organelles in the cytoplasm that are not needed by the body, they don't perform any function in the human body or in any other living organism's body, what happened to those structures? They are destroyed by lysosome. Now, we're going to look at tissue and organ. Now, we'll talk about cells. Now, we are made up of zillion of cells. We are made up of many cells. Not only, that's why we are called multicellular. Multi means we are made up of many cells. Now, if we have similar cells, how do we call that? We call that as tissues. Now, what is tissue? It's a group of similar cells working together to perform a particular functions. So, while organ is a group of different tissue working together to perform a particular function. So what are we saying? If I have to look at the difference between tissue and organ, I must use these differentiative words. While, where else, on the other hand. So that means I'm giving a difference between a tissue and an organ. So what is a tissue? It's a group of similar cells. So that means those cells are similar. It can be all muscle cells. When you look at the muscles, they are all made up of similar cells. That's why muscles, it's only up to a level of a tissue. Now, organ is a group of different tissue. So that means when you have organs such as the heart, it's made up of different tissue working together to perform a particular function. Another good example is a leaf. When you look at the leaf, it's made up of different tissue. We have epidermis tissue, we have parasite tissue, spongy mesophyll tissue, we have guard cell there. So you have quite a different type of tissue that work together to perform a function. And a function of a leaf is, this is where photosynthesis takes place. We can also look at the heart. It has different tissue working together to ensure that, to do what? To pump blood. We can also talk about the kidney, different function so that they can filter and form, filter blood and form urine. So you have different organ in our body. Let's start, for example, the largest organ in our body is the skin. We have organs such as, we go to the sensory organ, the eye, the nose, the ears, the tongue. So we have different type of organ in our body. And we have, for example, the organs such as the lungs, the liver, the kidney, the heart. So quite a lot of different organs that we have in our body. Now, then, if you have a group of different organs, what do they make up? They make up what we call organ system. Now, what is organ system? Now, we have different organ system in our body. So what is an organ system? An organ system, it's a group of different organs and tissue. So organ system are made up of different organs and also tissues working together to perform a particular function. Now in our body, we have this different type of organ. The excretion organ, which is responsible to carry out the characteristic excretion. We have endocrine system. It's a system in our body which is responsible for where we have glands and muscles, where we have glands which are responsible for secreting or producing different hormones. We have support system. This includes the muscles and the bone, the tendons and the ligament. The nervous system, this is where we find, for example, where we have the organ brain and the spinal cord, as well as the nerves and the neuron. That's like at the level of a tissue. We have a circulatory system. The circulatory system, this is where you find your blood. This is where you find your blood cells. Your blood cell, please, these are your white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. This is also where you find your blood vessels, tube in our body that transport blood. So they make up the circulatory system. We have a lymphatic system. This is where you find lymph, the node, and the spleen. The reproductive system, this is where you find all the different organs. It can be in a male, testes. This is where you find the sperm duct. This is where you find the penis. Or in a female, this is where you find the ovary, oviduct, uterus that are responsible for reproduction. We also have another system called digestive system. And this system, digestive system, this is where you have system such as, this is where you have organs such as your mouth, your tongue. This is also where you have the teeth, the esophagus, the stomach, the small and the large intestine. This is also the pancreas, also part of the digestive system. And this is also where you have the anus. So that means all these different organ and tissue work together to perform a particular function. Class, student, please pay attention to the information provided. Make sure you also complete your modules as a preparation for your examination. Please take note, you need to prepare very well all the information, not only the one that I mentioned here, everything. And I know if you pay more attention to it, you will pass this module. It's a very simple module. It's only us talking about you and the environment and the living organisms in your environment. Thank you very much. Do not hesitate to contact me on the information again shown on the screen there. Please, the email address is Gongera Joseph there, the cell phone number, and don't forget the contact time from 6 until 8 o'clock. Thank you very much.